Good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to be here with you and with our great lineup of speakers talking about media and climate change. There's a lot to talk about when we think about media and climate change, from the actual news and how we cover it and how many resources we're dedicating to this most important of challenges at a time when we're also caught up in the day-to-day news cycle, to also
important and play such an important role in the climate conversation. And in my role as CEO of Time, I'm really proud of the work that our journalists have done. A couple things that I'll mention just about Time. I just am a year into my role. We have the largest global audience in our history at 120 million. We just turned 100, so we're having our centennial. And I know the introduction for the panel was a lot about misinformation and disinformation. And it's so important to be trusted and to be respected and well liked, and I would say balanced. And that's a lot of what we're doing, especially when it comes to climate. And we have Justin Werland. He's like, I would argue, one of the leading climate journalists in America. And we have Time CO2, which is our climate action platform. We have Shaila Raghav here. She's our chief climate officer. I don't know if another media company has somebody like Shaila. So we have subject matter experts on the editorial side, but also across the entire organization.
And of course, Time 100 just came out, really putting a spotlight on different voices and activists, officials, CEOs that are influential in
just a separate something that we do. It's across everything that we do at Time. We have our Earth Awards, which we launched also this year, and we did our first ever Time 100 Climate Leaders. And I'm really proud to talk about it here today. What we did, we spent months, not just our journalists, but we talked to experts around the world to identify, recognize, and really celebrate who are the most important, influential individuals who are making an impact in climate today. So 100, we'll do it every year. This was our annual. 45% are women, 60% are international. And it was those that are driving change, building a better future, but also having measurable results and driving business. So that was the lens and the focus for the 100. And you're going to have people on this list that have been doing climate for decades, that are heroes, John Kerry, we've got Bill and Melinda Gates. But we also have those in regulatory areas. We've got those in sustainable luxury fashion. We've got individuals in design, in activism. It was just a really deep, wide-ranging list. We're really, really proud of it. We have Stella McCartney, who spoke at our Impact event last night. And if you see what she posted about this recognition, she said that it was the proudest moment for her in her career to be named by Time. So that, I think, sums it up pretty well.
And she also spoke on this forum and spoke about how she was seen as a lone voice. There were lots of people here at COP28 actually who were saying it was lonely, but it's nice now that that it doesn't feel as lonely. So she's definitely one voice that's been trust, but also you gain that trust by ensuring accuracy, data accuracy. Of course, Dow Jones has a series of outlets and ways of telling these stories. I want to ask you how Dow Jones approaches climate change stories, but also this point about data accuracy, transparency, and how information from media companies like yours plays a role.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and great to be here. So trust, as Jess indicated, is at the heart of what quality media organizations are focused on, and you cannot foster that trust without focusing on facts. We believe that the energy transition is the story of our lifetime. And we believe that so much that in the past 2 years, we've invested more than $1 billion in loading up on data, analytics, expertise. We have more than 650 people who are experts in pricing, in different aspects of renewables, and hitting all parts of the energy transition. And so that's critical for us. Then at our more mainstream outlets like the Wall Street Journal, you've got dedicated people, a team of probably a dozen or so people. Ken Brown is the climate editor who's here. But the climate has, and energy transition more broadly has permeated all of our coverage at the Wall Street Journal, at Barron's, at MarketWatch, but also in this separate pillar that we've created, Dow Jones Energy. And so I think that contributes to the responsibility that serious press has to invest in pursuing facts, creating databases that can then be used by reporters, but also by clients and other media organizations. But it's also a great business opportunity, and it was one of the points that Secretary Kerry made in the past couple of days, that there is climate and energy presents a
you about how you see that entertainment, but also diversity being important in the role of media when it comes to climate action.
Absolutely. Let me start by saying thank you for this opportunity, and it's an honor to be here and to speak to the audience today. I just want to clarify. So we are the founding shareholders and operators of CNBC Africa and Forbes magazine in Africa. So we run a licensed edition, and we're present in all 54 countries with headquarters in South Africa, and we've got our bureaus in West and East Africa, and Nigeria and Rwanda. So that's kind of the background. So a lot of my experiences in business media and news production. So let me start firstly by talking about entertainment more from a consumer point of view, because I think part of what I'm about to say is about the impact and the power that entertainment has, and that largely comes from being able to tell stories that make it relatable. So if you have an issue, you're more likely to take it seriously if you can contextualize it to your life and your experiences. And something like climate change and the impact of climate change impacts absolutely everybody. One of the things that comes to mind, and if you allow me to take examples from cinema, I don't know if anybody's seen I Am Legend. It's a movie that came out with Will Smith in 2007. I'm not going to go into the plot or no spoilers, but essentially, it's kind of a dystopian future where he's the only person left on the island of Manhattan. And then there's this imagery of, just the camera pans to basically Manhattan, and you see blue whales are swimming and coming up for air in the East River. And I think it's so powerful because it shows you the impact that humanity has had on the environment, and then the environment's ability to regenerate without humanity. It makes you pause and think, are the decisions that I'm making positive for the environment? So I think that's something that really showcases the power of cinema. Kind of like a second point on this, and again from personal experience, growing up, there was a program on television that it was a kids show that focused on recycling, and I think it was called Captain Planet, and it was very entertaining. And any millennials in the audience would probably remember this show. Yeah, there you go. So I think what's really important or impactful about that is that you're speaking to kids at a young age, and you're inculcating values of recycling and sustainability, and just being a responsible citizen. And it's important because you carry that forward as you grow up, and then you can impact real change. So I think those are kind of the points. As a final thought on this is that you also need to be careful as a media company. At the end of the day, we do have stakeholders, and we are a for-profit, largely speaking. One of the issues that we've seen in recent times is Disney's being criticized quite a bit because they're focusing more on messaging than on storytelling. So just something to keep in mind.
Well, it's a very good point to pivot to another point that I had wanted to discuss, which is the issue of advertising. And you're right, because media companies have to be profitable and be able to continue and running, so to speak. So I'll continue with you, Sid, if you don't mind. I want to ask you about the point of advertising, because media companies are often approached by particular industries that have a negative role on climate, but want to speak about what they're doing, about how some of the things are changing, and some of it is valid and some of it is not valid. How do you make a business decision about saying, okay, we'll take money from a particular industry that is actually problematic? Do you see that as part of what you should be doing in order to elevate their voice?
I think that's a very good question. And unlike Elon Musk, I actually do need advertisers. So, let's talk a little bit about greenwashing. Now, I took the metro here, and on the way, I saw about 8 or 9 billboards on Sheikh Zayed Road with green energy transition and carbon credits, and some of them were extractive industries that were talking about this. So it is a little bit of you wonder on one hand. You're burning hydrocarbons, and on the other hand, you're talking about green energy. So there's a bit of a mismatch. One of the things that we've seen personally is there's native content and sponsored content is something that clients are wanting to do more and more of. And it gives them an opportunity to talk about what they're doing in various spaces. And with the build up to COP, we've had a number of clients come in and talk about climate change and things like that. So unfortunately, we're not in a position, unless it breaks any laws or it's unethical or outright wrong, we're not in a position to turn it down. But what I think we should do, and what we are doing, is in the editorial space that we have in our programming, when we have the CEOs of these companies on, we need to then hold them accountable and say, hey, you put out this ad, but what are you really doing on climate change? There was recently on our network, there was a company called Just Share, which is a not-for-profit activist shareholder that publishes content on and research on how the big banks in South Africa are faring on climate change. And spoiler alert, they're not doing very well. But we need to give people like them a platform and the ability to hold the banks and other people that are part of this ecosystem accountable.
Elmar, I want to ask you about this because I think the term greenwashing also has pushed some companies not to want to even go public because they feel like anything they do will be actually used against them rather than saying you're doing a good job. So how do we strike that balance by saying, okay, you have a way to go, but at the same time, we acknowledge when there is some good stuff happening?
Yeah, so first, in the context of advertising, we have, over the past X number of years, transformed into a digital subscriptions business. And so it's predominantly our business, which so makes that, I suppose, less of an issue. When it comes to advertising, and we still have a chunk of our business that comes from advertising, we have very strict standards, and they're based around facts. So we fact check the ads that run, and that's for any industry, because there are controversies and questions being asked, of course, across many different industries. So that's how we have resolved for that specific thing. When you're asking journalistically, so how do you strike the balance between what's real and what's not real, I think that's where you do have to have manpower. You do have to have expertise. You do have to forces, and we can afford that longevity of reporting and that depth. And so it's important that we have as many media outlets as possible that actually can do that.
Jess, and I want to really pose the same question to you. How do you approach that time?
Well, my background is commercial on the revenue side. I am not a journalist, and media is a hard business. And I've always done traditional media. I spent 5 glorious years at the Wall Street Journal, never had a bad day there. And, my first role at this company is to make this a sustainable, profitable business.
Right.
Disclosure, we are owned by co-chairs and co-owners, Mark and Lynn Benioff, and climate is a very personal, big philanthropic initiative for both of them. And, I would say for advertising is really important for us. And we work with the, blue chip best brands in the world. And we're really proud of those partnerships and those relationships. We work directly with our customers at the very top CMO and CEO levels. And I think it's a collaborative conversation around, yes, transparency, accountability. We do feel that all voices should be heard and all voices matter. And when you look at the Climate 100 list, that's reflective of also who's on that list. And climate is an ongoing and forever project. And it starts now, it starts here. And if everyone does a little, everyone doing a little can add up to a lot. I would say, why is advertising so important? We don't have a subscription business at Time. We have a different type of audience. We have the youngest audience in our history, 45% are 35 and younger. They care vehemently about this topic, and they know that they're inheriting a lot of the challenges, and they've got to come up with the solutions. And I made the bold and courageous decision. You were there in the room when I made the announcement at our Time 100 gala that we were taking down our paywall. So I feel like our purpose and our mission is to tell these stories to a global audience. Not everyone can pay. Not everyone wants to pay. And not everyone wants to get blocked when you get on an article. And I believe that time should be available to everyone in the world and accessible for free. And that's my strategy. That's our mission. That's our purpose. And go to time.com. We have Time for Kids. We care about news literacy. Yes, we care about trust. Yes, we care about rigorously reported objective journalism. But, you know, in order to get this information into the right people, we don't want to do climate crisis communication. We want to do more solving. We don't want to make it all bright and cheery, but that's sort of the model that we have. I would say a couple of examples. I'll maybe just choose one. We partnered with American Family Insurance. We've been working with them for years, and we're now announcing Person of the Year. I can't tell you who it is, but tune in next Wednesday, the 6th of December. And it's something we've been doing for 95 years. And we collaborated on a program called Dreamer of the Year. And during our Person of the Year gala with AFI, we talked to Donnell Baird. He's a local, incredible entrepreneur running Block Power. And he has great dreams in the climate startup space, an incredible entrepreneur, man of color. And those are the kinds of things that I think when you look at advertising and how we can continue this conversation and make it really important, those are some of the things that we've been working on.
Can I just say the urge to go deep into a conversation about paywall or not paywall is very, very strong. But I will respect that this is a general audience, but we're going to have to continue this conversation because it's one of the biggest questions for media companies, but also our industry is going through so many changes. How people consume information, how they're being informed is changing at a speed that we can only keep up, but also we want to get ahead of the curve. So indulge me. I'm going to talk a bit about the industry, and then we'll open up to Q&A. So please prepare your questions. But I want to talk about, I think 2023, one of the biggest conversations has been about generative AI. And if we talk about trust, if we talk about sourcing, generative AI raises questions about that and how much can we rely on it or not and so forth. So if we look at a way forward, I want to start with you, Jess, how Time is thinking about generative AI, but also how AI is coming to help in certain newsroom practices. I know for us at the National, there are things that now we can actually turn to, whether it's, how you use a person's voice to how we're using machine learning to improve how people are using our website, but also very careful not to bring anything that's generated by AI as though it's journalistic practice. So I want to ask you about that. How does Time approach generative AI and how do you see the future?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Mark Benioff, the chair, CEO, and co-founder of Salesforce, we are independent operationally and editorially from Salesforce. Mark and Lynn own Time as a private investment. And with that said, I have spent a lot of time in the last year with the Salesforce executives and going to Dreamforce, which was the largest AI event, I think, in the world, in September. And there's just so much conversation around, promise and progress and excitement and enthusiasm. And then when we talk about media, or I get back to Time in our newsroom, there's more about peril and challenge and concern and job elimination and things like that. So it's been very, very interesting. I would say three things. One is we're covering AI like no other media brand. So we're really excited to make sure that we tell those stories and, again, identify those individuals. We are probably not doing enough ourselves because we're a little risk averse. We would rather others go first. We've seen a lot of others make a lot of mistakes, and we don't want to be in that category. So we're going a little bit more slowly around how we're going to use AI in our business, in our newsroom. I'm personally excited about some of the tools and technologies just to be smarter, to be more productive. we're working with Google on a couple of pilot programs where you could take a Time story and obviously translate it into any language, but you can also make it a version for a third grader or a version for a first grader. So there's like a lot of ways that AI can be really exciting. And I'll tell one very quick personal story. My son just graduated from the University of Michigan, and he was so proud to show me his final paper and assignment that earned him his diploma, which was an 8-page essay on the labor movement in the 1930s. And I know this kid, I'm like, he is not excited about that topic in an 8-page essay. Because he was that kid who came home and he was like, why can't I learn about 401ks? Why can't I read the Wall Street Journal? Why do I have to read Anna Karenina or like read about the Greek gods? And he was so excited because he used ChatGPT to do this paper. And I said, okay, first I'm going to strangle you for doing that. Second, I'm going to strangle you for telling me that you did that. But he said, no, you don't understand. The assignment was to use AI. And he was so excited to tell me how he prompts and the outline and the factually reported 8-page essay of which he passed. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for AI if we just do it right. And I know we'll follow you smart people who have a lot larger newsroom and a lot of data. So we're going to be looking to you, what you're doing at Dow Jones and at Forbes.
Well, thank you.
Please, Almar, absolutely. Tell us how you're going to do it. We're going to take your ideas.
So first, the coverage, of course. This is there are so many big stories right now, so many crises, so many changes. We live in perma-change, right? That generative AI is clearly a major story that is part of that narrative, and so covering it to the very best of our ability across all of our newsrooms is a top priority. And Emma Tucker, our new editor-in-chief, is very much leaning into that. When you talk about AI from a media company perspective, you get back to the discussion you wanted to avoid, which was about value. So the first principle here is, for us at least, that information, and particularly high quality information, has value. And we actually want to instill that feeling as well with young users and train people that information doesn't just happen for free. Quality information doesn't just fall out of the sky. It's very, very costly. We spend upwards of $1 billion on getting information to users. And so how does that connect to AI? Well, the learning models have been crawling. And so there is data that has been ingested. That data includes stories from many media organizations and basically anything that's been on the internet. And so as those pieces of information are feeding learning models, we are negotiating, and this is public and we've talked about it before, we're negotiating with several media tech platforms time, but local newsrooms in the US went along with that, and the consequence of making everything free at that time was that today there is a barren landscape when it comes to local media reporting, which has hurt local communities, et cetera. And so we are at a moment when the value of information has got to be recognized, and so that's part one, the negotiations around that, and that's ongoing. And we're approaching that in a constructive way. Second, this, as Jess indicated, this feeds into workflow. It's a work tool for our kids, but also for our newsroom. It will help efficiency. It will help reaching many more audiences through translation, for example. Third, it will create new products, and so we have several products in the pipeline that will trickle out over the next few quarters, and that will only accelerate. And so these products will take different shapes. Some of it is experimental. We're going to have to do a lot of test and learn. I think that is important. We're not just going to put everything on one particular execution. So it's exciting, but also proceed with caution. I completely agree with Jess that rushing out just to have an announcement around AI, there's just not much use to that, at least not for us. And so we're taking it one step at a time, but we have a large group of people focused on it.
Sid, I'd like to ask you, how does CMA Investment Holdings look to generative AI?
Gosh, there's so many ways to talk about this, and I'm trying to hold back the excitement because this is something that I'm personally very excited about, and I've been trying to implement across all of our businesses, not just in media. But on the media side, and at the risk of repetition, it does augment your ability as a human being. You can do a lot more, and you have efficiency gains. So we're trying to get our newsroom to start using it as a tool to at least do the bare minimum and then build from there. And let me give you an example of a workflow that we've recently started experimenting with. And I think the important thing is experiment until you get it right. And that is that we see ourselves primarily as a legacy TV station first, and then a digital media second. And that's just a function of the market that we're in at this point in time. So when we produce interviews on CNBC Africa, we then kind of have this treasure trove of content, and it takes time for people to kind of generate news from that. And then so one of the things that we're doing is we're taking that video and getting AI to transcribe it, and it gives you a fantastic transcription. And we talk about diverse voices. Try getting a Nigerian or a Kenyan accent or even a South African accent transcribed properly, and you always get mistakes, but OpenAI does a very good job of that. And then it generates basically a report that you can then use to build on top of. But the important thing here is human in the loop. You can't just take that and publish it because it is full of factual inaccuracies and issues. So it's very important to use it as a base, but then make sure to fact check and build on top of it. So that's something that I'm really excited about, just in terms of process automation and augmenting our team's abilities.
I like that. Human in the loop. It's very true. We have a relationship with Google where we can do simultaneous, not only translation, but audible of all the National's all in the English language, but we immediately make it accessible in Arabic through a relationship with Google. And I think there are different tech companies that you can build a relationship with, but we've always had to work so hard to make sure that one, translation, accuracy, and it's that constant learning that they're doing and that we're doing. And I think where you can have collaboration, but at the same time, there's also been a contentious relationship, I think, between media companies and big tech companies. And actually, time and Salesforce is an example that many people look to, where you can see how it can work. But as you said, keeping those distinctions, right? So, questions and answers. Please raise your hand if you would like to ask a question, and just let us know who you are when you ask your question. We have a roving mic, which will come to you. Okay, so we have a lady here and then a gentleman there. So we've got two, thankfully, on the same side of the room.
Hi, my name is Kyla. I'm from New Zealand. I represent a company called Soma. I have a company called Soma. And my question is really for you, Omar. You started by talking about the kind of factual nature of, and obviously, as we all know, facts are presented in the form of narrative that includes choices about the way that we present facts. Got a utopian future of no humans or a utopian future of whales in the harbor. What kind of work do you do before we get to the reporting stage on a particular issue in order to make decisions about the focus area or I would use the word ideology, but it's not about being, I know you're not an ideological organization, but there's always ideological choices behind which facts we choose to present and in what way. How do you address that?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, if we do have an ideology, it's being factual, right? That is our, and not to be coy, but that is the value we hold in the very highest regard. And so, pre-reporting, this is where we made these investments to make sure that we have data sets that are actually pricing. There's undeniable trends around that, where we understand sort of intricate, again, financially driven decisions by companies in large data sets. And so as much upfront data that is proprietary to us gives us a competitive advantage, but also helps us tell stories that we think help society, help people make decisions, but ultimately also then help us grow as a business because we prove greater value. And so I think the more we can upfront equip our reporters, our editors, our analysts, and really all of our employees with access to those proprietary data sets, I think that's critical. Perhaps superseding that is just culture. You have to have that culture of accountability that if you have gone too far in one direction, that you acknowledge that, whether that's in a headline or making an outright mistake in an article, just owning that and creating a culture where that's self-declared, where people maybe realize they've made a mistake and make sure that their editors know about it, and that's not something that just gets swept away. I think having that, and I was raised as a reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Those are pretty intense moments when you realize, oh, you've made a mistake, right? But I think that's where that culture starts. It's like, how honest are you around that? So if you have created a culture like that, just maintaining that, making sure that those values are upheld. We have a very, very strict code of conduct, so that your personal behavior and your own perhaps ideological proclivities are not intertwined with your reporting somehow in an explicit way. And so everyone has to, every year, sign that, and there's lots of questions that are asked about your behavior, whether it's financial or have you had any political activities, et cetera. So that's what you do up front, create that culture, making sure you have data sets, and then, I think those are some examples.
That's great.
Yeah, hi. My name is Alok Deshmukh. I run a company called Superhuman Race. It's solving for primary reliable impact data. Two-part question, if I may. One is in your discourse and your narrative, I'm a little disappointed with the title climate change, which really should be climate crisis or climate emergency. So what's your position with your company's change or crisis or emergency? And the second question is, as we talk about greenhouse gas emissions and the whole discourse around net zero, I think we all understand the limits and constraints. And we talk about net zero like it's a profit and loss statement, where it actually ought to be a balance sheet. So, yeah.
Thank you. That felt more of a comment than a question. But the first part of the question was your question towards anyone at the panel, or we can just. Do you want to take a stab at?
So change, crisis, yes. I'm going to say yes, both. Running media, we have to be really careful in how we tell these stories, because we don't want to have, again, I like a crisis in communication, and then you have this, I can't read this, it's over, there's nothing we can do,
Right.
Or you feel like things are great and it's fine and it's not going to affect me. And so it's a real balance in our reporting and the stories that we tell, and it's not easy. And we're sort of spotlighting the solutions, the individuals, the ideas. We've evolved our business, we've evolved our brand, we've evolved our journalism. We use the sort of tagline around building a better future. So we are trying to personalize these stories again in a way that is about me, right? Because at the end of the day, climate is about us. It's not really about the planet. We need the planet for us as people. I believe personally that once you become impacted yourself, and you mentioned a balance sheet, once you become impacted yourself in your community, in your family, and in your wallet, you take action. And we need more people to take action. And that's just the way it is. It is. And with climate events happening regularly, globally, everyone's going to be impacted and they're going to take action. And so it's a balance. And I see Justin's here in the audience. Hi. And he's an incredible leader of all of our climate content. He could speak to it better than I could, but that's sort of my position.
Thank you. Question here, please, and then we'll go.
Hi, Alex Javankaf. I run a company called In Silico Medicine. We do AI for drug discovery. But by the way, first, I wanted to comment that the fact that we have empty seats in this panel is shocking because the role of media, I guess, it's the most important feature that drives us towards fighting climate change. But my question is on generative AI. Great question, Mina, but I don't think it was fully answered. I have two questions. So one is, are you planning to introduce your own conversational tools in the near future, either Time or Wall Street Journal? And also, how do you ensure accuracy with generative AI? Because at some point in time, the journalists will use the tools, and they are becoming increasingly valuable because you can crawl the entire internet and provide real-time reporting with high accuracy. So my question is, how do you achieve accuracy? Even in climate change, you can do immediate real-time reporting.
Yeah, so I'll go first. First, we want to walk slow when it comes to using new tools and then making them public-facing. So there's no rush, whether that's a tool that a reporter might use, and then the product of that appears in a publication. The newsroom is reasonably conservative around that, and so there's still a fact-checking process before anything reaches a reader. So there are editors who look at stories. So that at this point has now gone away. Even if you look at simple things with generative, for example, translations. So translations can be really good, I think, as you just indicated, for some languages. For others, sometimes the nuance is missing. We do see examples where generative AI, when interacting with human intelligence, it works really well. One of the things that we do at Dow Jones in our risk arm is to identify financial criminals or human traffickers, and we do that for corporate clients and so on. And we have found that as a human, we have quants and researchers in Singapore and Barcelona and Princeton, hundreds of them, looking at large data sets. On their own, they can draw certain conclusions and move at a certain pace. But with generative AI and the ability to summarize, they can access far larger data sets. And so we've had situations where financial criminals very often set up shell companies and fronts and fake websites, where there was an HR company in Southeast Asia that the researcher suspected of not being up to snuff. but they couldn't really prove it. So then they used generative AI for a massive data set and found out that there were corresponding phone numbers and email addresses on another site that a human could simply not have found because the data set was way, way, way too large. And so they connected these two things and found out that the HR site was actually a human trafficking site. And so we call that approach authentic intelligence, where we bring the human and the machine together. And so we hope to see more of that, not just in that very specific business, but I imagine that our reporters, our editors, over time, they're going to have very, very powerful tools at their disposal, where hopefully we can unveil a lot more criminal behavior and introduce just more facts into the world. So,
Sid, you said you were quite excited about generative AI. So if you can address those, one, do you plan to introduce tools, but also ensuring accuracy when used?
So I think at this stage, we're not planning on doing anything public facing. And that's largely because of the occasional inaccuracies that you get. And it would be irresponsible for us to do so. So it is an internal loop. And as I said earlier, internal tool and human in the loop is important. So nothing goes out without somebody double checking and fact checking. So that's currently where we stand. But one of the opportunities that we see, well, it's a threat and an opportunity. The issue right now is that these large language models are developed by a few companies, and they have they're still figuring out their business models. And we saw what happened with OpenAI over the last couple of weeks. My fear, if we continue building with these products, is that they might turn around and change the pricing model, availability, data sets, things like that. So one of the things that I think media companies or anybody who has large amounts of data should be doing is developing their own large language models and training their own data. We have a repository of, hundreds of thousands of articles that have been written over many years. Same with video content. And I think that's something that we would potentially be looking at in the future, is building our own LLM.
Thank you. Question here.
Hi, this is Jonathan Hawkins from a small media startup called CNN. You mentioned, Alma, earlier on about the barren landscape of local media and the importance of local journalism in terms of the climate crisis. I'm just wondering if you see any hope of reseeding that barren landscape, and what can be done to reinvigorate local journalism, particularly on this crucial topic, given its importance.
Yeah. So I am, in spite of that earlier comment, I'm quite optimistic on the long term about local media. And here's why. The barren landscape also translates into an opportunity. What we do know, when you look at the VIX, the fear index, for what we see in our readership, of course, each time there is a crisis, we see more people, of course, coming to the site, as you would at CNN, but also more demands, subscriptions and the like. And so we know that people crave factual information. And so the trick is to make it available. There is a market there. And what encourages me is that you now see a proliferation have been sort of pushed out of the mainstream system, but who have expertise, who have local knowledge, who might have very narrow knowledge about certain aspects of a community. You see them step forward and they're experimenting. So you see actually a beautiful mosaic of different initiatives and different almost tests, live experiments taking place all over the U.S., but also outside the U.S. And so something is going to translate, I'm confident, into a model that works. And you can see that it's not exactly local reporting, but there's, for example, legal experts that can do really factual reporting, can break stories, have scoops, and find an audience for that is either willing to pay or there is an advertising model around that. And so if you see that wherever we see a narrow, focused information that creates value for somebody, I can make a decision based on this. There is a business model there somewhere. And so we have found that out for industrial verticals and different focus areas. I'm convinced that within a local context that will exist as well.
Thank you. There's a question here. I'm going to ask you to please keep it very short because we're going to run out of time.
Okay, my name is Fahad. I represent Arab News in Saudi Arabia. First of all, thank you for such great discussion. My question is for Jessica. You spoke about how you removed the paywall. So what's your take on this argument that says that if you value quality journalism, you have to pay for that? And because that also enables the writers and journalists, gives them more resources to work for it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask just this gentleman to ask his question, then we'll group them together just for time.
Okay.
Gentleman at the back, yeah. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shubha. I'm founder of Enheroes Global Energy, and we are setting up a special purpose media fund to jumpstart the startups that are trying to use media for acting as a tool for climate change. So my question is to Sid. How do you see investment in an arena you can use media for as a tool for climate literacy? And I'll have a small comment that it's a very nice topic, and we can think of a lens like money, mind, and media. This is the 3M that's should be the lens for the climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Jess.
Yeah. So for time, this was the right business model and approach for our brand. It was not. It was a courageous and bold decision because clearly everyone else is going in the opposite direction. I made the decision for time. Number one, it wasn't working for us. We're not the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg. We have a very different audience. We have a very different model, and we have different journalism. And we're a 100-year brand. And we talked a lot about trust today. And 100 years of trust, it takes one mistake to lose that. And the red border is globally recognized as that trust, and we need that now. So that's our mission and that's our purpose. And if we're going to stay around for another 100 years, we want to stick to what our mission is and what our purpose is. And it really lent itself to that. The second is, this is a little bit of your gut and a little bit of, I've been in the traditional legacy media space my entire career. It's the only thing I've done. And I just saw that this isn't working. And this isn't working not just for time. I just went first and I just said the truth. But it's not working for Netflix. It's not working for Hulu. It's just the subscription business had a huge moment, and it's still going to work for the Wall Street Journal. It's still going to work for the New York Times, but it's not going to work for everyone. Mm-hmm. And I saw my own behavior during COVID. I had like 20 things that I was reading, and then all of a sudden I wasn't reading 20. I was reading 5, and I didn't want to pay for all 20. And I think that that's where consumers were headed. I saw this coming. That was my gut. And the third thing is kind of what's going on in the US with the FTC, which is click to buy, call to cancel. So click to buy it, you're done, but you can't get anyone on the phone when you want to cancel. And I think a lot of the credit cards are complicit. So you're getting these recurring fees that you just don't really know about or you don't want. And so again, it wasn't the right decision for all of media. It was just the right one for time. And I'm really proud of where we landed.
Right, our time's up, but Sid, I'm going to ask you to just respond to that one question before we wrap up.
I'll try and be quick. So I'll just use your comment as a starting point for the response. So the most important thing you mentioned, in my opinion, is money, right? And that's when you kind of contextualize a problem and make it relevant to people, and education is part of this. Is that how does climate change impact my wallet? And is that through my livelihood? Is that through my way of life? So I think that's something as a business media channel we do well, because we're already seeing the impact of climate change on things like flash floods and crop yields and things like that. So I think that really does make it very important and urgent for people.
This has been a great panel. Thank you. From the responsibility of climate coverage, investing the resources in people and abilities and data sets, to trust, the value of information, but also the business opportunity that we have as media companies with covering this all-important climate crisis, climate change, climate action. Important to make stories accessible and relevant, and thinking about our audiences and who they are. We're lucky to be living in an era where we actually know more about our audiences. You know, before we used to print a newspaper, put it out there, and hope that the editor's decision was right. Now we know if it is or it isn't. And of course, the speed of change of what we're witnessing. Important to talk about subjectivity. I think rather than ideology, we're all subjective. We chose to be in this panel rather than the 20 other panels that are happening. Subjectivity and what drives us, what moves us. And in the end, how climate change is impacting us as individuals, and therefore our responsibility as media people to make sure that we're covering that story. Thank you very much for your insights and for your time. Please, a round of applause to our panel.
Thank you.